Hi guys, this is Hiro. How's everyone doing today? Ajibala Kemcho, Aj Sabkeseho. So today I'm discussing the true nature of Ketu, okay? Now, one disclaimer right at the start is that I understand that most of this information might be either A, unorthodox, or B, the way the information is presented is unorthodox. Okay, so I'm acknowledging that. Possibly, I don't really know. I haven't seen it presented in this way before, okay? So I'll just assume so. Secondly, I'm gonna describe this video in explaining kind of all the different portions and energies of Ketu, right? But it's important not to understand all of them. It is important to understand all of them individually, but it's important to take away how all of them individually come together to form this thing called Ketu, okay? Because if you don't, then you're kind of going to be missing a piece or some understanding, and then you're going to wonder why it's all unpredictable and things like that, okay? So just, you have to acknowledge all the stuff and form it together to get its true understanding of its overall behavior, okay? Because most of the videos I've seen, I haven't seen a whole lot, so but the ones I have seen are like, they're just focusing on individual parts, okay? Which is not, it's effective, like possibly very, very long term. But if you want to kind of get a good grounding now, you just need to understand the basics of all the parts, not just specifics in just one, and then understand, in my opinion, okay? Next, I'm going to get started with this video. Now, all the parts, I'm going to relate it metaphorically to the actual physical body of a snake, right? This is important because each individual part, like I said, is so important. So it's important to understand all the parts that I'm trying to stay fully kind of at a general baseline. So the best way that you can conceptualize this rationally right now over video is to relate it to something physically, which is something that kind of your mind can understand, okay? Now, moving forward. So, starting this video, Ketu, it is the body of a snake. So let's take a cobra, right? A 15 feet cobra. It will rise, when it's about to strike, it will rise about 1/3 of its body length. So that's about 5 feet. And then when it's striking, it will extend another 1/3 and then jump out another 1/3, right? So basically, the whole thing that allowed it to strike is the body, right? Which is what Ketu represents. Now, if you see Ketu, it owns 3 nakshatras, right? They're all the beginning of fire signs, which is Ashwini, which is the beginning of Aries, Maga, which is the beginning of Leo, and Mula, which is the beginning of Sagittarius, okay? So, and what do you notice about these 3 nakshatras? So not only are they the beginning of fire signs, but they're right after Gandanta points, right? So it allows you, like these energies are all very like, let's get going, right? So Ketu actually, what I was trying to describe here is that it's actually the planet that makes things happen, right? And you kind of got to understand it. So we know that we possibly know that it represents like past life abilities and karmas, right? Which you're bringing here. Now, it kind of makes sense that all the stuff that you're bringing is what you're working with right now, right? The tools you brought is what you're starting off with here, right? So Ketu is kind of the planet that makes it happen, right? Now, what we also need to understand is that, right off the bat, is that when you go to, so a tail is how the snake eats, but a tail is also how a snake gets caught, okay? So either human grabbing it or some animal. I'd imagine most of them use its vulnerability of its very long tail that's defenseless for the most part, like especially like a cobra or something. So point here is that Ketu can also be your biggest weakness. So you need to be very, very careful, okay, when conducting yourself in Ketu, or else it has a chance to in an extreme disaster. Like if a snake gets caught, dude, there's no second chance or anything, right? It's not like Saturn where it's like, oh, like slap on the wrist here, dude. It's just, it's too late. It's over. Like it's game over, right? So I'm just gonna say that. So you need to be very, very careful because it has the consequence possibly of something very irreversible disaster happening, okay? Now, moving forward, you need to understand that a snake, I just said it rises 1/3, it extends 1/3, and it jumps another 1/3 around, okay? Don't quote me like scientifically on this thing, but let's just assume for right now it's that. It basically, its strike range from where it's sitting, it's basically its body length. Okay, so it cannot extend out more than how long its body is. Point here is that you need to understand when you're running some kind of Ketu Dasha or something like that, your your abilities and karmas that Ketu is bringing into play here are very, very important. And if you try to extend beyond that, it's not going to end well, right? Like, have you ever seen like a snake and like a mongoose or something? If it strikes and it misses, dude, it's possibly over, right? It just grabs it and runs away. So if you try to extend out more than you can, and like let's just say you don't reach, it's not going to end well. So the point here is that it does not want you. It's not encouraged to go beyond out more than you need to. Okay, as far as from ability point. Also, you need to understand, a snake, the body, it does not require that much food. Yeah, the snakes don't eat that much. So you don't need to feed it that much. You don't need to hunt that much. You don't need to go out and get it, pursue a lot of stuff, right? It kind of just wants you to chill. Okay? So the point here is that, and whenever it does go out, it's putting itself in danger. So not only is your actual maximum ability you need to keep involved in, but actually also, even if you're not trying to take too much like short-term risk, also from a long-term risk perspective, it does not want you to go out and like hunt that much, right? Especially if you don't need it. Also, like Ketu itself, like the body can only digest, like the snake body can only digest so much, right? There's actually like a cap, like a limit. Like it can't just stuff whatever it wants in here, right? There's actually instances of like snakes like exploding. So yeah, you need to be very cautious about your abilities and also like the frequency at which you're pursuing these karmas that you have the abilities in, right? And it's all because of the fact that Ketu is your, it's how you get stuff done, right? Because imagine if you're a snake body, right? It's how the snake, it needs to live, right? It needs to do some stuff, right? But it's not that much now. So yeah, but it's also its biggest flaw. So it's like the biggest strength and your biggest flaw, right? This is why some people say it's like a flag and stuff, because it's like your biggest strength, but it's also your biggest flaw, which is kind of why people say you're like headless. Now, it's not necessarily these two analogies of it being headless and it being a flag. There's, in my opinion, some better ways to put it, possibly. Okay, I'm not going to argue about that, like which analogies are better. I'm just going to present more to kind of get you to understand. So I just explained, okay, it's not that necessarily you're like the headless part. It's not that necessarily you're stupid, right? It's not like from a human perspective. It's that it really doesn't want to go beyond what its abilities are, and it really doesn't want to do more than it has to do ever. Okay, that's basically the point of this, right? In a short-term or long-term perspective. So you need to understand that anytime you're going beyond that, like a snake body, you're putting yourself at unnecessary risk. Okay, which is kind of what it's trying to teach you. Only do what you have to do. Okay, and the other part about it being a flag. So snake is a very, very dangerous thing, right? Like I can just leave it at that. So how it makes stuff happen is through the body, right? The actual body of a snake. So yeah, it's like a flag in the sense that it is something you accomplish, right? A snake needs to eat more than once. So when it's ready, like you intuitively and spiritually I'm kind of apply it metaphorically here to you, or like how people are. At the right time, it can be resourceful, right? To paying off karma or for a snake to eat, right? But it can't, there's only so much it can do it, okay? And there's only a certain time period it can do it, right? Because like snake can't just eat back to back, right? Like there's only a certain time period, there's only a certain frequency, there's only a certain ability, there's certain kind of variables in play to monitor how much Ketu accomplishes. But when it wants to accomplish, it can accomplish its food basically for the next month or something, or months, right there on the spot. So hope that kind of illustrates a little bit the karmic like suddenness of the snake, right? Now, one other thing is that these are like the main points. I'm 10 minutes in this video. These are the main points, but there's certain non-main subtle points that I obviously couldn't describe in this video. This might be like a part 1 video. I might make a part 2. Those subtleties about like understanding certain karmas and abilities from before and things like that, obviously I can't explain in this one video. The way you get in touch with that, and you guessed it, is through meditation, right? The best way, you've heard me say in my videos before, getting in touch with the internal, it's like connecting with the spiritual internet, right? So when you meditate and get into really high states of consciousness, your brain is not quite, your rational brain is not quite as involved. So you're able to kind of understand things that can't necessarily be comprehended from the rational mind, right? So I'd encourage meditation. I have meditation videos on my channel and things like that. Or you can just figure it out how to do it without watching my videos if you want. Or I would also recommend, you consult a guru or a teacher that's like actually knows what they're doing, okay? Not just some possible big name person, okay? Because a lot of the big name people, they promote you to develop your spiritual ego rather than your actual spirituality, which is something I've said. So that's something that you do not want to do during Ketu, right? It will burn you severely. That's that. The other thing about being burned real quick. So I said, the best way to kind of get in touch with all this, like at a deeper level, is obviously through meditation, okay? For now, until I make my part 2 video. Now to give you more of like a level up. But I said, so a snake's tail is its biggest vulnerability. So the way it gets caught, when it gets caught, it's done. Like, if anybody who's had like a really bad, like something in Ketu, to an extent, at some level, it was probably irreversible. Okay, or it altered your path in such a way, it required you to alter your path in such a way that like your life path, you can say, right? It's not like Saturn where you kind of just like possibly like keep going a little bit or something like that. Like kind of change, maybe don't change. Like Ketu, like it requires an immediate change almost. Now, I'm not saying like every single day of your life, if you're running a Ketu Mahadasha, is going to require immediate change, okay? Actually, I could also make the argument that at a deep spiritual internal level, it is. But as far as external, see, what happens is things escalate physically, externally, if they're not taken care of at more the higher levels, right? If they're not taken care of at more the higher levels, you tend to go deeper and deeper and deeper, right? And the deeper and deeper kind of resonate to the chakras, right? We all know that our bottom 3 chakras are kind of like our lower self, right? Like the bottom one being the physical, the one above being the emotional, and the one above that being the mental, right? Like the earth, water, and fire chakras respectively. And I made a video on like my lower chakra theory video to describe this more. And I've also talked about this in many videos. But basically, in general, the pain, if like kind of like the sudden warnings, they'll kind of start up top and then work its way down. Like first it'll kind of hit possibly like your ego possibly. And if you don't listen, you don't kind of understand like the limit of your karmas and things like that, it'll more affect you deeper emotionally. And then it'll kind of affect you physically. And you guys know, if something affects you physically, like some kind of bad injury or something like that, it's really life altering, okay? It's a very big inconvenience. Like everything emotionally, mentally, you can kind of keep it within, right? But even actually emotionally, like it might not be as much of an inconvenience or a life altering effect as if something really bad physically happening, but there are like plenty of mental trauma or emotional trauma that can form also. That's also life altering. It's not like necessarily you can see it. So it's not as like harsh, possibly, arguably you could say, as the physical, but it's still pretty bad, right? But basically the point is when you kind of start to see consequences, or you kind of get intuitions or inklings that you should kind of stop at more of a mental level, ego level, and you don't, it'll burn you at the next level. And then it'll burn you, like one day it'll just burn you at the next level, right? So you want to take that into account, okay? So that's it. We're just beyond 15 minutes here. I think that's going to wrap it up. There might be a part two. There might not. Let's see. But until next time, I'll talk to everyone later. Thank you all very, very much for watching.